Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth webinar in the ScotLogic Business Insights from Women in Tech webinar series. Today, I'm joined by Qun Taylor, Head of Digital Platforms Technology at NatWest Group. Qun is the fifth and final presenter and will be closing this series with a Women in Tech panel discussion, with many of the presenters from this series, including Qun, on the 15th of July. Details of how to register for that will come up at the end of this webinar. And if you've missed any of the previous webinars in this series, you can watch them all on the ScotLogic YouTube channel. If you have a question for Qun, you can pop it into the question box and we'll take as many as we can at the end. And if you'd like a copy of today's slides, you can download these in the handout section. So let me introduce you to your speaker for today's webinar. Qun Taylor has over 25 years of experience in technology and heads up the award-winning digital channels team at NatWest Group, responsible for the mobile and online banking platforms that are relied upon by a combined total of approximately 9.5 million active customers. As an experienced leader of transformational change, Qun recently led the successful migration of the flagship mobile channel onto AWS public cloud. This bold, large-scale and seamless migration to a new, highly secure, cloud-based platform has just won the FSTech Digital Transformation Project of the year 2020. So congratulations to you and the team, Qun, and over to you.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining today. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about my own experience of being a female leader in technology, leading technology teams predominantly in the financial sector. I'll be trying to share some of my tips on how to succeed when you're the only female in the room. So this is also going to be a bit of a call to action to all of you to try and get more women into this very pivotal area where we are very much underrepresented. Let me go past the introduction. So just to show you the structure of what I want to talk to you about. I've had quite a lot of different experiences in my very long career, but I've tried to whittle it down to my personal top 5, which are firstly, unconscious bias, not surprisingly. Secondly, about evergreening your knowledge. Thirdly, about actively developing resilience. Fourthly, being yourself as a leader, being you. And finally, my call to action to all of you about bringing more women into technology. So let's make a start. Firstly, unconscious bias. This is where I want you to think about how others see you. So just a couple of minutes ago, I gave you a bit of a whistle-stop tour of what I'm about. And actually, I need to give you that whistle-stop tour because I skipped that. But let me go back again. A bit of my background is my background is very much around. When I went to school, I was very much a science nerd. I was what you would call a STEM girl. Before that term was even coined. I did all science A levels. I went to university and did a biochemistry degree. And then I followed that by moving into technology. I did a master's conversion course in IT. And after leaving university and leaving education, I went into a software house called Logica, where I kicked off my career by programming air traffic control systems. Following that, I went into finance and I moved into investment banking where I was leading technology teams. I started off as a developer, moved into leading technology teams, but I worked in the area of real-time electronic pricing and trading, which was very dynamic and very interesting. In the last few years, I've changed direction again and I've moved into digital. and I now lead the technology teams for mobile and online banking across NatWest, RBS, and all those associated brands. So telling you that has set a picture for you. But what I want you to think about is take yourself back to when you first saw me on the screen. What did you think when you first saw me? What were the assumptions that you made about me? And had you formed those assumptions at first sight before I'd even spoken? What might others assume about me, or indeed about you? How might new acquaintances perceive you? And indeed, what would you want them to see? And how might you influence them to see what you want them to see? The common assumption and association of unconscious biases is that it's associated with race and gender. They're the obvious ones. But actually, unconscious bias is based on your dress sense, your social class, the way you speak, even your hairstyle. The list is actually endless. My second point is that you can't control unconscious bias completely because it's very ingrained in other people. You need to understand how it works, and by understanding it and putting yourself in other people's shoes, it's possible to overcome it. From a personal angle, I've always found that it's easier to overcome these preconceptions if you try and understand in the first place, but then challenge them. So my final point is where it brings it back to the point of this talk, which is about women in technology in particular. In my opinion, women still struggle very much to be taken seriously in very technical disciplines. So I'm not just talking about computing, I'm also talking about medicine, other research scientists. I think it's quite a common problem. So by being aware of what the biases is, then it's possible to challenge and prove your own credentials. So as I said for myself, I try and bring forward my technical credentials earlier to try and make sure that I get a balance early on. Other possible tactics would be to get to know people ahead of a big meeting. So break down that unconscious bias before it's important. Put yourself in that other person's shoes, understand their viewpoint, and build rapport to overcome what is an initial impression. So I think it's time to hand over. My next section is about knowledge, and I think it's time to hand over to Claire. So it's time to get a poll and get you in the audience involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me run this poll for you now. You should see that on your screen any minute now. So the question that we're asking you today is, how much time do you currently dedicate to keeping your technical skills up to date? Now, I'm only going to give you about 30 seconds to place your votes here. And your options are: I am always learning. This is part of my daily routine. I look into subjects on a need-to-know basis. I spend some time learning, but not enough. Or I haven't picked up a book since university. So if you want to just place your votes there, I can see them all coming in. In fact, everybody's already voted. That's fantastic. You're all very quick today. So let me close this poll and then share the results with you. And we should see that on the screen now. So 45%, the majority of you say, I look into subjects on a need-to-know basis. Nobody is saying that they haven't picked up a book since university, which is fantastic. So back to you, Qun. What do you think of those results?
So that's actually pretty much what I expected. I'm very glad that people have basically not picked the last option, but I'm sure that most people are struggling with time looking to subjects when they need to look them up. Google's a great tool, as we all know. So if I can go back to my presentation, she goes. Right, so this section is about knowledge and keeping your technical knowledge current. I seem to have lost a word there, I'm afraid. So what is quite important when you're leading technology teams in particular is actually having that technical background to build a bit of credibility, I think. So what it comes down to is my first point, that techies respect other techies, so know your audience. And having a bit of that knowledge, doing a bit of that homework stands you in good stead. My second point is you don't need to be the most technical person. As a leader, you need to have enough knowledge of the concepts to understand what your engineers do, but you're never going to know it to the detail that they do because that's their expertise. But what you do need to do is to be able to understand what they do, understand the concepts to help your decision making, and to be a better technology leader, because you need to use that knowledge to build and lead technical teams, to think strategically, to influence other areas, and also to manage your stakeholders. So you need a wider skill set, but you can't be lacking in the technology, in your technical knowledge. My third point is about your SMEs, your subject matter experts. A key part of your role is to recognize and nurture talented individuals. You need to, as a technology leader, to gather opinions and listen to them. You know, not from one source. You can't become over-reliant on certain people, but you need to be able to gather and digest a range of opinions and actually formulate a strategy or decisions from them. I think when I started leading engineering teams, someone said it was very much like herding cats, which is very true. It's a very creative skill set. People are very passionate and very opinionated in what they do. So you do need to be able to gather that knowledge and digest it. My final point is a point of the poll: homework. Do your homework and never stop learning. You need to try and build learning into your daily routine, because technology is moving at such a fast pace right now, and it's actually only just speeding up. It's really difficult to keep up with all the different developments that are happening at the moment. So you need to try and keep that learning and keep that knowledge evergreen in order to keep on top of your job. So what I did find when I moved to new areas, what I do try and do very much is to look at the SMEs I've got in that area, look at the skill, the techies, look at the shape of the team, and evaluate it first and see what talent you've got there before you make any changes and augment by bringing in additional people. I think it's really important to evaluate what you've got. Okay, so let's move on to the next section, which is all about resilience. So in my view, resilience, the type of resilience I'm talking about is the capacity to respond to pressure and demands in a modern workplace. So this is really important in your role as a technology leader, because transformational change and delivery is a key part of your role. And as anyone who's ever worked on big programs or areas where the pace is fast, you'll recognize the zones that we've got in this little tool here. What you need to do is actually be able to recognize when you need to apply that resilience and take mitigating measures to protect not just yourself but your teams, because it's really important that you recognize when the team's under pressure, when they're in these zones on the left-hand side, because they can't afford to spend much time there. It's too draining, it's too sapping, and ultimately the teams will suffer. So in terms of percentages, these are percentages which are proposed, but the idea is that you shouldn't spend more than 5% in the burnt out zone for sure, and in the performance zone you should spend the vast majority of your time. To sort of bring this to life a bit, a recent example which Claire quoted in my intro, which was about the migration of the NatWest mobile app onto public cloud. As a background, the mobile app is the flagship channel for NatWest. That's in common with most banks. We've got over 7 million active customers just on mobile, and it's one of the most heavily used platforms. What we wanted to do with this program, which was so challenging, was we were not only writing a new application, we were also hosting it on brand new infrastructure, and we were also embedding a new DevOps operating model alongside this, all to meet very challenging dates. The way we mitigated this issue was by looking very much ahead and looking at the challenges. So we made sure that we phased the delivery approach to be very transitional. We wanted to avoid a big bang, no matter what. And all the initial phases were very MVP, very small features, where we could learn the technology, we could prove out the tooling, and we could test out the operational procedures with no risk to any mission critical features. Because for us, managing the risk and impact to our customers was the primary objective. It worked, I'm very happy to say, and in September last year, we successfully completed the migration onto public cloud. And we moved over 7 million customers, migrated very seamlessly. They didn't even have to re-register on their app. So that was a very good outcome. Right. So my next section is about authenticity. This is about being you as a leader. And that's subtitle I very much believe in that you need to trust in your instincts and adhere to your principles, because unless you believe in what you're doing, it rings false and you don't come across as believable to yourself or to other people. So this is very much what I've said in here, but another point I'd like to add under this section is that often I think women are feel forced to fit in a very male-dominated environment, and they can adopt male behaviours. But be careful, because you don't want to fall into that trap. It's not sustainable to do that, and you really do need to seek out an empowering environment that allows you to be authentic and be your own person and your own leadership style. The second point is about the differences. So by this I mean the differences between the way women are perceived and the way that men are perceived. So women do have to walk a narrower line than men do. If you're seen as too accommodating, the perception is that you're weak. If you're seen as too ambitious or too aggressive, then the perception is you're a dragon lady. It's difficult to manage, but by being aware of it, you can make sure that you don't overstep and veer into behaviours which don't do you any favours in the long run. My next point is about you and your own confidence. Self-confidence is really important, because in an environment where you are in the minority, be it by race, by gender, by anything, it's very easy to feel intimidated or belittled. So know your own worth. Remember that you earned your place at the table in common with all the peers, all your peers in your team. And be prepared to demonstrate your abilities and your potential. Don't shrink back. My next point is about visibility, your visibility. So your own profile is within your control. And my perception, maybe this is wrong, but in my experience, women tend to trust that their achievements will speak for themselves. There's a real assumption that the quality of your work, the long hours you've put in, the hard work will be recognized without you having to promote them, without you having to sell them. I think men tend to be more bold in terms of how they share their achievements. I think you need to come forward and raise your own profile for, and actually sell your achievements, because no one's going to do it for you. So you do need to take that into your own hands. My final point is about networking, which is commonly brought up, to be fair, but it's not about networking indiscriminately. It's very much about networking strategically. Plan your network, know what your goals are, identify the key stakeholders, and then form that network positively to help you with future collaborations to achieve your goals. I did think that women do tend to neglect this, because it's a bit like the visibility point. Women tend to shy back from this a little bit, and I think it may be because networking has traditionally been conducted on more male territory. Other possible tactics in this vein, to speak to other people who you see exhibiting the behaviours that you see here. Identify good leaders who you admire, and get them possibly to be your mentor. And if you do get someone you admire to be your mentor, really work at that relationship, because I think a lot of people don't invest enough time in that mentor relationship. Set clear goals, work your agenda, make sure you've got measurable outcomes to help you achieve what you need to achieve. And finally, this is my call to action here. So, bringing more women in technology. My first point is actually about the role modelling, and this is easier than it looks. If you're already a female leader in technology, you're already a role model. You don't have a choice in the matter. So take it further. Start mentoring younger females who are on the ladder. Help other women onto the ladder. I mean, I'm not saying totally mentor only females, but make sure that you do have an eye to this and help other people. The next point is very, very close to my heart, increasing the supply. I've been running technology teams for a frighteningly long time, and I've always seen it's really difficult to get CVs in the door for females at all. So even getting them in, even if you go to the agents and ask specifically to bring more CVs in for engineers, it's still a scant supply, and we need to increase that supply. And that means starting really, really young. So code clubs is my first point that I'd really want to see growing. We have code clubs at RBS and NatWest. And it's great to see the kids coming in, boys and girls, and actually learning that technology isn't a scary thing, and it isn't just about playing games, but that they can actually change it and have power to do that is a really powerful thing. The next point is also very pertinent to myself, because I've got 3 daughters who are good at STEM subjects. The youngest one, I'm not too sure whether she will go that way yet, but they're very good at STEM subjects. And I'm really passionate that women and girls at that age shouldn't be put off. They should be encouraged to consider STEM subjects and not allow any social biases to sort of veer them away, because there's so much aptitude out there. And even if they don't do computing as a first as a degree subject, it doesn't mean that they can't go into computing at a later stage. The next point is about that later stage, actually. It's growing that junior talent. So where we have a more even balance between males and females, I think it's really important if we can bring in more graduates or apprentices or leverage specialist firms to bring in girls who have a STEM background and therefore have the aptitude to learn. And then we need to teach them in an environment that empowers them to make the most of their potential, because it's a real opportunity to widen that pipeline of talent coming in. And now I'm going to the other end of the spectrum, which is about leavers, returnships. So many women leave in their 30s, leave technology and go to have a family, because it's quite difficult to balance working in a pressured environment and raising young children. But the problem that we see is that women are put off from coming back because technology moves on really quickly, and they've fallen behind. Their skills are rusty, and so they need encouragement and flexibility to come back. And I've seen lots of really positive returnships in my experience. I do think we underuse them. I think we need to try and have a program around that more, and because there's a huge skill set out there waiting to be tapped. My final point is about sponsoring women, which is making sure that you identify talented women within your organization, your wider organization, and act as a sponsor, encourage them, give them opportunities, help them build their networks, do all of the things in the previous sections to help them grow and see what they need to do, and coach them. So that is the end of my webinar. I'm not sure where we are for time, actually, so I'll pass it back to you, Claire, for questions.
Absolutely, and I can see some of the questions coming in already. So if you do have a question for Lee Qun, pop them into the question box, and let's see how many we can get through in the next few minutes. If you can just flick onto that final slide, Lee Qun, I just want to give a quick mention to the panel discussion that's going to bring this Women in Tech series to a close on the 15th of July. Lee Qun is going to be joining us again. And thank you so much for that webinar, Lee Qun. That was absolutely packed with all sorts of advice. I found that so interesting. And that, I'm sure, is going to provide such a great basis for the discussion on the 15th of July. So the link to register is on your screen now. It'll also be in the email that you'll receive tomorrow, where you'll also get a link to the recording for today's webinar. So I will quickly go to some questions. So I've got one here that says, thanks Lee Qun for this great talk. I wonder whether you've found it easier or harder to lead teams as a woman the more senior you have become.
Yes, I think I have, because I think it actually goes back to my point about the delivery and letting delivery speak for itself, because I've always been very delivery focused, and so I'd let my achievements speak for themselves. And actually, as I've become more senior, other skill sets have had to be learned. I'm not naturally a good salesperson, so I find it difficult to sell myself and promote myself. So I have found it harder, but it is important to do it, because if you don't promote your achievements and those of your team very much, because I'm very team focused, then it means that doors remain closed. It's very important to celebrate your achievements.
Great stuff. I'm going to take one more question because we're nearly out of time. So this question says, you talk about keeping your knowledge current. Can you recommend any ways to do that? And what are the areas that you would recommend extending your knowledge in?
Okay, so I've got a huge list, as long as my arm, of things I need to go and read about. In terms of areas for technology, it's very much cloud computing, security, digitization, multi-factor authentication. Also, a lot of data work is so interesting now. Data and analytics, data science, automation. To be honest, there's so much. Once you start going onto some of the websites and seeing them, you just realize that there's a lot to learn, and you can never really stop, because it's evolving all the time. But it doesn't mean you need to learn to be able to do it, because, to be honest, I hung up my keyboard in terms of coding a little while ago. But understanding the concepts, as I said, is really important. In terms of doing it, I'm really sad. So I often walk into work, and I think I'll be doing it a lot more once lockdown finishes. I find good technology podcasts, and I listen to them as I walk in. because it builds it into my day, so I'm not having to sacrifice anything for it, and it actually makes walking a lot easier. So things like that. Possibly in the podcasts, I think are great. So I've got a family, so say I'm cooking, if I put on a podcast, I can listen to it at the same time. TED Talks are also really enjoyable. There's an awful lot of material out there that you can leverage. So just go and explore, and you'll probably find some really good sources that I haven't found yet either.
I think that's a great tip. And there's so many questions here coming through, which is great to see. Maybe I can collate these and we can weave them into the panel discussion on the 15th of July. So I hope you can all join us then. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much, Qun, for that fantastic webinar. Really enjoyed that one. And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you can join us again on the 15th of July. And enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.